Ms. Adkins? Mr. Hendricks?
Here.
Mrs. McDaniel? Mrs. Peterson? Mr. Stoffer?
Here.
Mr. Wylage?
Here.
Mrs. Shuffle?
Here, can I get a motion to approve the June 20th, 2022 agenda?
So moved.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wylage?
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle?
Yes. Commendation and good news.
Nothing for tonight. Kind of a slow time of the year, clearly. We've got our summer school in session, but not a whole lot going on right now. Baseball team, softball's doing fairly well, but not time to really report on any state runs or anything like that.
Okay. We'll go on then to comments and suggestions. This is the first time during our agenda that anyone in the audience or anyone online that wants to type in the chat can address the board. Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on to consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have an updated personnel sheet?
We do. We have 2 additional resignations.
Is there any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wylage?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle?
Yes. Reports.
No reports tonight.
We could put that in with good news, right?
There you go.
Okay. We'll go on to discussion items 7.01, science and ELA curricular programming purchases.
Thank you. We have Dr. Jones here tonight to report out on some work she's been doing, some pretty tedious and extensive work relative to our science and ELA programming and resources. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Jones, to take it from there.
Sounds good. First of all, I want to acknowledge that I have a couple of teachers here with me that were involved in the process from the beginning, and that's Amy Higginbotham. She's first grade teacher at Cruft, and then Nathan Vanzendi, and he is in 8th grade. Did I say first grade or 8th grade? You said first grade.
Oh, turn that on. Is it green?
It was green. Oh, sorry. I just wasn't in front of it, maybe. Okay, all right. And then Nathan Vanzendi, who is an 8th grade science teacher at our middle school. And again, they've been involved in this from the very beginning. They're here to help support the work that we've done. There may even be 1 or 2 folks joining us online. I know one of them said that she was going to. I'm not going to mention her name unless I know she's there, so I don't want to call her out and make her feel bad later. But if you have any questions that I can't answer, I'm certain that one of these people that are here to help support will be able to answer it with and for me. First of all, I just want to share that when I do these reports or do these write-ups for you, I always lead with the ask. But sometimes the ask is, I don't know, for me it was sticker shock when I looked at it and said, ooh, wow. And I think sometimes it's nice to get the background information as well. So I just want to give you a little bit of background information that some of it is in the following pages, but other things are not. So for example, when we started this journey in January, everybody knows about the substitute situation, hard to find, et cetera, et cetera. But folks, our teachers are awesome and are willing to come in during the evening hours to start the work. So we had a core group of folks meet, I want to say 3 times maybe in the evening to get this started at the program level. So when we start doing this work, we think about the end in mind. So we think about backward design when it comes to school and programming. And we asked ourselves the question before we ever looked at any resources, which is what's before you tonight. And we said, so when our students leave Lewis Central, how are they going to be better prepared because of our program, whether it's science or in our two cases here, whether it's science or English language arts. And that's a question to answer at the program level. So it doesn't matter if I'm thinking from first grade as Amy, or if I'm thinking as Nathan does in 8th grade, or if I'm thinking as one of our science or ELA teachers as a senior student teacher. It's how are they going to be better because of our program? And then the other question we asked ourselves as we started was, how do the experience in science or literacy, how do those experience help further our mission of inspiring excellence? So those are the two things we started with at the very beginning of all this back in January. And we talked about, well, what is our philosophy? What are our enduring understandings, our essential questions? We know our standards because that's based on what the state of Iowa has told us. However, all those other things are left for interpretation, right? And so we started at the program level, did that work during the evening hours starting in January, and then we took that to the grade level. And so as our teachers are thinking about what they're doing in their classroom and preparing and planning for that, they're able to say, here's how what I'm doing in my first grade classroom connects to everything from craft, connects to the middle school, connects to the whole district level, which we haven't had that kind of coherence and tight coherence like that for a while. As the last few years, probably 5, 6, 7 years that we've been doing this, I've been really trying to think about it that way, about it helps us think about how we're all in this together and how we all impact our kids before they leave. So the idea of starting with the program level, it makes us step back and makes us have a little bit of patience because we all like to get to those resources. We like to get to those things that we know are going to make an impact for kids daily. But to give us those anchors to start with really helps us make those decisions in a better way. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to share that at the very beginning was if we have our program ducks in a row and our grade level ducks in a row, and we know what we want to do to impact our kids, then what we're going to use, our tools, are easier to evaluate and not just look at the next fancy thing or the pretty shiny thing that comes along. So after that was all done, then we had 50. Now think about that. 50 of our teachers come together in June, the first full week right after they got out of school. So you think about this, and that's almost a fourth of our teachers that felt empowered to come and say, I want to have a say. I want to be able to help pick out. I want to be able to help make those decisions that impact our kids. And so when we had 50 of our teachers come together, it was an interesting situation in our 3 days after in the 1st of June, because I have groups of teachers coming in and out. We were using that room, had 3 or 4 different groups in here going, and we all used the same process to go through this. So we looked at it, and you can read through a lot of this, so I'm not going to go through everything. But in the big picture, it didn't matter if you were science, it didn't matter if you were craft, or if you were a high school, or if you were ELA. We all went through the same process, and it was three steps. Sounds really super simple. We gathered evidence around the resources finally that we wanted to get at, the 2 to 4 options of resources that met a bigger picture, non-negotiables. So we looked at the evidence that we could see. Then after we looked at the evidence and gathered that, then we got together and we analyzed by grade level, sometimes by whole building, depending on how many folks were here. We applied rubrics. So again, it wasn't simply because, oh, we thought that looked really cool. In fact, sometimes the things that looked really cool on first blush, they figured out as they went through this process that it wasn't as great because it really didn't meet the needs that we needed it to have. So we analyzed the evidence, and then in the end, they made a recommendation. They had to reach consensus, if you will, by building. It's very difficult to think about a K-12 adoption of just about anything. We've been blessed in the last couple of years that we were able to look at illustrative math at a K-12 span. But doing a K-12 ELA/literacy or doing a K-12 science adoption is pretty rare, meaning the same resource being the best fit for those students from kindergarten through seniors. So we looked at it by the building, and it was really cool because, again, as you read through all this, our K-5 folks are ending up with the same, over the course of the next 3 years, we will have the same resource aligned K-5, which, for our core resources, which is something that has not been apparent over the last 10 years probably. So having that alignment for students is huge, because that helps the student transition from not just grade to grade, but from building to building. So I'm really excited about that part. So again, you can see the kinds of decisions that we made when it comes to literacy and ELA. What may not be as obvious is the empowerment, and I've said it once already, but the empowerment of our teachers. Our teacher leadership program has really built a lot of confidence with our teachers, and they have that confidence now, and they're empowered to help make these decisions, and our decisions are much more powerful. All of our not all of our teachers, I suppose, but a core group of our teachers are so invested in the decisions that are being made, that when it comes to the implementation piece, which is our next hard road, I suppose, right? When we have to get all the resources, but then the implementation piece is the work of the teachers. So again, having them empowered to be in that decision making, we listened to their voice. You can read again how we did some surveys with the K-5 teachers around that ELA resource, and wondering, so how are your resources working for you now? Because we don't want to discount something that's already working, right? And students are responding to, and then we asked the question, are those the best that they could be? And that's where we looked at what are the gaps, et cetera, et cetera. And again, they felt empowered to be able to come up with those decisions that sometimes were not really easy to make. It's not always easy to think about a big change that's going to come along. Let's see. Something else to point out, I'm just thinking about science now. I've made some notes along my way here. When it comes to science, middle school, grades 6 through 8, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but in 6 through 8, Iowa chose to take that span of standards and put them in the buckets of grade 6 or grade 7 or grade 8. That was not the way the national and NGSS standards are. They're spanned. So a lot of the resources that we could look at were also spanned. So when our middle school folks looked at all of these resources, again, really cool resources, the idea of thinking we have to cherry pick from each of these grade levels to really work for grade 6. But then we don't know what gaps or what holes they're going to come in with knowledge and things like that. So even if the resources were kind of cool and met some of the needs, there was so much work and so much what ifs involved that our middle school teachers, and I think all but the new teacher that's coming on board with us this next year were part of this. They came to the realization that our units of study are pretty good that we have right now, which represent our curriculum, right? Our units of study do. They're pretty good right now, but after looking at all of this and seeing this rubric and knowing what it's going to really take to become what's called a 3-dimensional unit and meet the standards, we're going to need to take those units of study and really think more critically and look at the rubric to enhance them. And then what they found out is that, we're also going to probably need some equipment to get from our students, and I think Nathan's the one who said this to me at the beginning, was to get our students from watching someone do science to actually doing the science. And so instead of having a new resource, core resource like a textbook or an online service, it was more about what equipment, what materials can we bring into our classroom with the units of study that we have, and have the students more involved in the doing process. And I'm not just the teacher's not just doing the demonstration, but the students are doing the work as well and doing those laboratories. And so that was to me something that came out of this whole evaluation process I was not expecting. And yet I'm really happy with the fact that our teachers are analyzing what they have, not just saying, well, let's pick this next one because it has some really neat features to it, but it's not really meeting our needs. So I really applaud them for taking that step, which is going to be the harder step when it comes to implementation, when you think about that one. And so that really takes me to the end and really asking, are there some questions? Because I'm guessing there might be, but I'm not sure what they're going to be. So I'm ready.
I think it's important for, for anybody that cares to listen to this and pay attention to it, and a lot of people should, but to realize that it's important work that school districts need to do somewhat on a cycle, because this idea that everything we learned when we were in school was perfect and exactly the way it should have been is just not true. I mean, things evolve, we get better, we get smarter, we learn more about resources and even teaching strategies. So when people see something like this and they think it's a big ticket item, I think is how you said it.
Kind of sticker shock.
Yeah, a little bit of sticker shock, but it really isn't if you consider what it represents. And as you said, a lengthier cycle probably than what we would prefer. So I think it's admirable work, and thank you for leading the work, and thank you for all who were involved, because it's work like this that I think people take for granted, and they don't realize. It's easy to criticize what a school district teaches or doesn't teach, but usually those criticisms come from a lack of understanding that this kind of work and study with intent collaboratively goes into some important decisions. And the only thing I wanted to point out while they're deciding if they have any questions is when you see on Dr. Jones's description that I plugged in here for the agenda item at the bottom, for the ELA purchase, there is parenthetically, it talks about another amount of money over 22 and 23. You'll see I didn't put that into the proposed motions. I'm looking at you, Bob, because you often give motions at the end, because clearly that would still come back to you for a purchase. So you're not agreeing to that financial component tonight, but that's a foresight, I guess, of completing this work and what it would cost over the next 3 to 5 years. So that we appreciate that information being in there, but that's doesn't need to be part of a motion when we approve these two pieces.
And I really wanted it in there too for another reason with the resource that we're choosing over that evaluation time is what's called Fontes and Pinnell Classroom. And our CREFT folks started that journey in 2018. And the way the way we approach that with you folks is over a 3-year span. And this is very similar. So I was thinking, okay, making sure that they realize that it's got lots of components if you dig down into what's called the classroom. And we're not going to just throw everything at them at once. So that idea of over 3 years was important to point out for that reason.
So like, as I look at this, it looks like there's some of it's text, and
Yes.
some of it's equipment, and some of it's consumables.
Very little is consumables, but I will say a little bit of it is if it's something new that they've never done before. So it may be something that, what would be a consumable in a science class? Maybe, I'm making this part up, sorry about that, Bob. But that may be red food coloring, right? So they've never had to have red food coloring before. So we would purchase that at the beginning to make sure they had what they needed to start with. And then as that needed replenished, then it would be a building replenishment consumable situation. So yes, you are correct. And I will say also with textbooks, a lot of the textbook is an online subscription to our textbook. It's a 6-year online subscription. And then we purchase also, in the ELA case, in English Language Arts case for high school, it's actually what they call a soft cover, but you get that every year. So it's a soft cover that they have in class. Otherwise, for science, we buy classroom sets of hardback books, in order to make sure that if something crazy happens, you know, the internet goes down or something, which doesn't happen very often anymore, we would still be able to hold class. Also for those students who perhaps don't have internet service and would want to take a book home.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Dr. Jones, and
Thank
to
you.
all the teachers that, I know it's a big undertaking, but much needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to 7.02, 2022-2023 student fees.
So the most important thing to note is that we're not recommending any changes for the vast majority of our student fees for next year. We've kept those in check the last few years, especially when we were in the middle of COVID, for good reason, to make sure we're taking care of our families. Sometimes when it comes to meal prices, however, we do not have much control over that. So I'm going to let Andrea talk to these a little bit, because in good Department of Education form, we actually had a forced change that came out just today. So it's a little bit different than what is on your sheet, but that's unhelped on our end. So Andrea.
Yes, so the student prices for the lunch and the breakfast are all a 10-cent increase. The adult breakfast is an increase to $2.85. And the one thing that is going to be changing from what is up there is we had set the adult meal price at $4. But we received notice today that we have to be at $4.1275 for our adult meal price. So we're going to go ahead and go with $4.15 for our adult lunch price, to meet the minimum that is set by the Department of Ed. So all very minimal. We haven't obviously had an increase in our meal prices in quite some time due to COVID and families not having to pay, but with the increase in food costs that we're seeing, we feel that there is a slight need for it.
Any questions? All right, thank you. 7.03 classified handbook updates.
I've witnessed Andrea and Jenny working long hours, sifting through all the classified handbook information that was provided for the board in advance. And I don't know if there's the specifics of things that you want to walk through, Andrea? Okay.
Yeah, so we did meet with groups of the classified staff, and then we also met individually with some managers, directors, and administrators as well with our changes. A lot of the changes are clarifications that staff or the managers, directors, or admins wanted to see in the handbook. The only real major changes are with leaves, and it's changes that we've done with other groups as well. So the family sick leave from 7 days to 10 days. So that'll be district-wide. Bereavement, we had it set as 1 other day could be used for anyone, and we would like to change that to 3 to match everyone else across the district. And then the other thing is to allow for classified staff to be allowed to carry over 2 days of personal leave for a max of 4, which would match the certified staff. The classified staff also had a rule under the personal leave that they were not allowed to use personal leave during the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks of school. So we would like to just change that to the first or the last day of school to match what the certified staff have. We find that a lot of the classified staff that are requesting things, it does have to do with their own children in school, or taking someone to college, or a graduation. And so we felt that there was that. We do have in the classified handbook that no more than 2 classified staff in a group in a building are allowed to take personal leave at the same time. So that would not allow it to be wide open, but would give some staff the option if they needed to use their personal leave that day. And then the other thing that we did as well was we updated with the position changes in there, and there is a typo in there that Bob caught for us that we did not catch the position change, but I have made that change in there as well, in the operations transportation portion. So, are there any questions?
Everyone good with any questions? All right, 7.04, voter-approved PEPAL ballot resolution.
So our PEPAL, or physical plant and equipment levy, is set to expire. The voter-approved PEPAL is set to expire in 2023. It's always wise to factor in time when you have expiration dates coming to make sure that you have a couple possible election dates to consider. So I think Andrea and I have been talking about this for over a year now, and we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to get this on the ballot for September 13th. And we're proposing that it be set at $1, and that resolution has been included, and if the board approves that tonight, it would we'd move forward with getting that placed on the ballot for September 13th. Anything else to add to that, Andrew?
I do not have anything.
Is there any discussion?
No, I think it makes sense.
I know we've had it at 50 cents for the last 20 years, I believe. It's, I know with going, the bond for the high school, the board back then felt that keeping it at the 50 cents, but now that the high school's all paid off, other construction is through the 1 cent, that, right, the save dollars, and so raising it to $1 will be able to keep our facilities upgraded, keep the things that need to be done, because we don't have a new high school anymore.
It's really needed for cycle maintenance and,
Yes.
and keeping things up to snuff, and making improvements that wouldn't otherwise take a bond issue.
Right, right. And this will be a special election?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. 7.05, middle school surveillance camera upgrade.
Going to turn this over to Dave, let him talk through these bids.
It's time for us to attend to the camera surveillance structures at the middle school for upgrade. This does add a couple of door access control units also into the mix. What we did was we invited vendors to meet with us and laid out the cameras that needed to be replaced, as well as we met with administration of the building to talk about areas where they felt there was a deficiency in coverage, where they'd had problems with kids or or other kinds of issues, and they needed better coverage. Most of the cameras that are being actually replaced are exterior cameras, and some are some of the oldest cameras that we have in the system. There are also exterior cameras being added at the middle school, specifically on the south side and the west side of the building, because now we have traffic that goes behind the building and where the new bus pickup lanes are planned on the south side of the building aren't covered also. So this adds cameras in those areas. The 3 vendors are all reputable vendors. In fact, they're all on our integrator list for Genetec. Prime Communications is an incumbent vendor that we've had since we started with the Genetec system. VTI is the group that is doing the surveillance in the doors installation at the auditorium project, and Echo is the company that did the installation of the doors and video surveillance at the operations building. So they're all reputable vendors. They did come back with slightly different plans. That's why you see 25 for one and 21 for another, and 22 for the recommended vendor. Access cameras are the cameras of choice of the district. All of our cameras right now are access cameras. The Echo bid was for Hanwha Samsung cameras, which would be a departure for us. But we're recommending the low bid from Prime Communications for $52,180.05. There may be a delay for some of these. I know where your next question was going to be.
That was going to be my next question.
The plan right now is to get all the wiring accomplished during the summer, get the cameras, get in a queue for the cameras. But some of these cameras, especially the multi-lens cameras, are going to have a lead time that we can't tell yet.
Right.
So Prime does not believe that the project will be finished before school, but they will finish all of the intrusive work before school starts. So we won't be disrupting students.
And will we be able to keep the cameras we do have?
Yes, yeah, everything is
Still
working
there.
now
Okay.
yeah, an example, one of the cameras that needs to be physically replaced is on the corner of the building outside of Mandy Reynolds' office, right? That captures the entry there, where the buses kind of come in, swing around to go past the front of the building, on the highway side, the South Elmer Bridge Road side. Those cameras do function now, but the picture's not great. They just need, it's time to update them. But they will work until we switch them out. There's no additional wiring for those where those are happening. In fact, many of the mounts, we can use the same mounts that we had before for the cameras. I think one of the reasons, but my belief, one of the reasons that Prime's bid is considerably lower than, or comparatively lower than the others, is because they do know the system well. They put it in when we installed it the first time, so they know the mounts and all the kinds of things that are presently there, and so there were less unknowns for them to deal with when they put their bid together.
Any other questions?
The one thing I didn't see on Prime's was their proposal was I guess a camera coverage scope.
No, they didn't put one together. It's very similar. The coverage we expect is very similar to the others.
Because the one place I guess that causes me a little concern that we don't have a lot of coverage is at that main, at the lights coming into the middle school.
Yeah.
Because there's,
I'll
we
show
don't,
you.
it's outside what coverage we get from the high school, and we're not, at least the two drawings don't look like we're putting any coverage on that.
You mean the?
This
the
right,
lighted- the
this
lighted
light right here?
entrance?
Yeah, the that northern end, on north, or.
The actual entrance into the property.
The
off
one
the-
that has the traffic light.
Yeah,
This
and,
one right here,
Well,
No,
there's no
on-
No,
light
the
there,
next
you go
one
up further.
up.
yeah.
at the light, but we've had, I mean, the city does have lights, have cameras on those lights, because,
They have cameras on the lights. When I talked with Mandy, it wasn't a concern of hers at that particular point. We also don't reach into like the softball diamond very well from the middle school side. That is certainly something that could be considered to be added. We actually did add cameras around the entrance area here. The views of these cameras, the external cameras, are not great now. And so there are added cameras there, but they're not long-range cameras at all.
They
They're
get
really-
everything at the building.
Yeah, they're really designed to see the entrance very well. And they will go out in about half of the parking lot very well. But the further out you go with these particular cameras, they're not long-range cameras.
we can access those city cameras. We've had accidents at the stoplight, and I think that's public access, is it not?
I don't know.
I think that's
think you
public
can.
access, yeah. But the other thing too, Dave, I was gonna mention when you were talking, and I'm only repeating something that Joe Vinchetto has shared with me a few times. Don't we have one high school camera that is actually pretty good, that actually is on the high school building, and it can extend well into the middle school parking lot? Not that it's gonna get a license plate, but
Yeah. Where it's positioned, you can see this corner pretty well. I wouldn't say this corner as good.
Okay.
You know, it's more on this west side that you
Yeah,
can see.
okay.
And we also have, when we did the stadium project, we put cameras on the stadium that looks across as well. So there's some ability to get into that parking lot. It really wasn't a concern of Mandy's at the time when we met with her, so we didn't pursue that per se. Personally, I was more concerned about the new areas that didn't have coverage on the south side and on the west side.
And I'm assuming that south area around our new transportation operations building, that building has coverage that covers and gives us line of sight of those gates and,
Well, we
Access
have
points.
some coverage to the parking area. It's really tough to see on this picture. We have coverage into the bus parking area very well. We can see the northwest bus exit, the gated section there. But really where up near the building, there is not coverage from the operations building very well. There is on the edge of the building, yeah, it's kind of hard to, you can't really see it on this one. There's coverage on the edge of the building that goes that direction. The multipurpose room is covered, right? That entrance is covered. But the further down you go to where the new construction for the vestibule is going to be, is really not covered. So we've added in that portion, all of these external cameras here to make sure that all of this bus lane that's going to be new is all going to be covered. And then the road along the west end of the building will be covered too. If coverage of the parking lot is a concern, it would not take very many cameras to add to get that into the picture. The next building that we're planning to do, by the way, is the door access controls at the high school and the external cameras at Titan Hellencraft. Internal cameras are in pretty good shape in those two buildings right now.
To give maybe attempt to give a little insight to Mandy's thoughts. We usually use our cameras to fact find or to go back and to look at things. They're not monitored cameras,
No, I know.
you know, so I think she's speaking from the perspective of where are the areas that I need to go back? Where are my problem areas? Where are there things that I have to investigate? That's, I think, her building principle mentality versus, you know, maybe if a, you know, security guard that sits and looks at cameras all day would probably have a different scope.
Probably, and to be honest with her, her focus was inside the building. We, Chris and I brought the exterior of the building to the table, you know.
Is the, I don't know what you want to call it, the building that's in the back by the track, that, those cameras catch the entrance to that building, right?
Athletic building?
Yeah, whatever.
See, so this building here.
Yeah, is that captured by the, it looks like that corner, that, if I
Yes.
remember searching right, that's where the door is into that building,
Yeah,
right?
there's doors.
It's on both sides.
On both sides.
We captured this door over here from the stadium,
Okay,
and this door, well, there isn't one on that end. It's
No.
on this end, isn't it?
yeah,
Is-
they're on that corner.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
from this
Just wanna
camera
make sure.
here. And this camera is actually a 4-lens camera, so it points that direction also across that parking area there.
Is there any other questions? And these will be purchased out of
Physical plant equipment.
the PEPAL.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions?
The state's talked about some security dollars available.
Yes,
Have we
we're
looked at-
probably gonna have $50,000 or so that we can use to increase physical security issues. Yeah, and external cameras make perfect sense for that, so does door access controls. We'll be able to accelerate our plan.
Any other questions? All right, we'll go to 7.06, ESSER Administrator Incentive.
Slightly will sound like a bit of a repeat to our last board meeting, where I presented a recommendation that ultimately was approved by the board to give what we called an incentive to return for our teachers. It's a time, our teachers and our support staff, it's a time where we've been pretty fortunate with teacher candidates, but we do see that slowing a bit. We think being connected to the metropolitan area, we get a little bit of a boost, maybe a little more, on the end of having candidates. We're also next to another large school district. Rural Iowa is struggling with teacher candidates. We struggle with just about every other employee group on the support staff end of things. The governor had an incentive in place in middle of the spring, and I think it was in March, and it was an incentive for teachers only, and it was a limited group of teachers, but it was for teachers to finish their contract for this year, which was a nice gesture. I don't know that that's really a problem that school districts were having with people actually leaving mid-year. We felt the bigger concern was getting people to return. And we have seen more retirements, and so we continue to worry about that. And we like our quality staff to stay. We want to retain our staff that we acquire. So I presented that to the board, our own, using ESSER dollars, which is what a whole lot of school districts, in fact, just about every school district in southwest Iowa, and I assume that that is replicated throughout Iowa, but did something similar. So I recommended that for the teachers and for our support staff, and that basically means everybody except administration. As I explained to the board last time, I represent administration. I am administration. To me, it just didn't seem appropriate to be recommending the same thing that I was recommending for paras and such as administrators. However, as a board member suggested, shouldn't we look at our principals too, our administrators as well? And I quickly said then in my update to the board, we have administrators that work every bit as hard as any administrators I've ever worked for and with. They're respected administrators, and they are, pulling their weight as much as anybody. So I felt that that's entirely different when it's something that's proposed by the board. So I have no problem with the board pursuing that recommendation of their own. So I brought it back to you for consideration to add the admin to the return incentive for next year. ESSER dollars would be used. We still can do that within our ESSER dollars. And it would be the same $500 incentive. And again, that's per recommendation from the board. I did not receive any feedback suggesting otherwise prior to printing the agenda. So we moved forward with it, and that's what we're presenting to you tonight.
Is there any discussion? All right, we'll go on to 7.07, nutrition services bid.
The only thing I'll say before I ask Andrea to speak to this a little bit is you're probably wondering, why didn't I put that right after the student fees on the agenda? That's because when I was writing the agenda and I got down to the end, I realized that I forgot to put that on there. I was too lazy to go back and rearrange my whole agenda. So anyhow, this is the nutrition services bid that we deal with annually. I'll let Andrea speak to it.
Yes, so there are the 5 contractors that we use. All of these bids are a 3-year bid that have the option to renew up to the 3 years. So none of these were put out this year. We are continuing services with all of these. They have all been able to fulfill what our needs for this past year to the best of their ability and better than what we're seeing with some of the others that we use on a supplemental basis. So we are recommending to approve all 5 of them for the 22-23 school year. Are there any questions?
Any questions? All right. 7.08, consider real estate bids.
Thank you. 2 board meetings ago, we presented the board with a resolution following some lengthy conversations that I have had with the board about what we would like to do with the what we're now calling the old transportation building and grounds. The district for some time has been realizing that that's not a space we were going to occupy for a long amount of time. So we really haven't treated it as something that we want to keep up to date. And we contemplated various ideas, either raising the building, keeping the property. And I was instructed to get an appraisal of the property. We did get an appraisal of the property. That came back at $515,000. Clearly, though, that is you have to factor in some of the issues that the property may have with it, including things like the roof and the fact that it's got a underground fuel tank and a septic system. So the board asked me to pursue going through the process to sell the building and the land associated with that. We advertised in the newspaper that we were holding a hearing at the last meeting. That was the resolution that the board passed 2 meetings ago, was to hold that hearing. We held the hearing. We introduced invitations to bid. I contacted the people that left phone numbers with us that were suggesting they would be interested, so we gave them a heads up to the best of our ability. And we've had a open period of time between the last board meeting and this board meeting, and we've had no less than 3 inquiries. We thought that we may get a few more today, but we did receive a bid on Friday, and I'm going to have Andrea walk down that in just a minute here, but I think it's a bid absolutely worth considering, and I will be recommending that the board accepts the bid tonight. So Andrea, you want to share the details of the bid?
Yes, so the bid is from Scott Glenn, and the bid is for $500,000. And Scott is the owner of CFI Tire, that is the lot next door to the building.
And the invitation to bid clearly states the property is zoned commercial and is being sold as is, which, as you know, that language in real estate means exactly what it means, as is. He took it upon himself on his bid sheet that he put back in to write in his acknowledgement of the things that he's very familiar with, being a neighbor next door. So I think it's a well thought out bid on his part. Our minimum bid we were asking to receive is $415,000. Could we get more bids? It's entirely possible. I think he's been a respected neighbor. I think he gave a really decent bid considering the low amount that we put in. And personally, of course, I'm departing soon, but I'm trying to sew up as much as I can. And I don't say that I'm recommending you accept it because of that. I'm recommending you accept it because he's been a good neighbor, very good neighbor to us, and would hate to lose his potential sale. And he could have just came in right at the minimum amount and hoped for the best, but I think that speaks to his interest in the property. The process from here, just so you know, since we're doing this through a bid process and not through a realtor, is if the board does vote to approve accepting this bid, I will immediately forward that information tomorrow to our real estate attorney, who resides in the same office as our general legal counsel. And he will draw up the legal contract, and we'll present it to this gentleman and determine a closure date to execute the contract, and it'll be done.
Is the building completely empty? Everything out of there?
Well, no, there's a few things in there, but with our storage now, we'll have no problem.
Okay.
It's mainly documents, file cabinets, I think, and whatnot. And to be honest with you, I'm answering that question based on my knowledge of about 4 weeks ago. So there could be some, I haven't asked that question lately, since Jeff's been back doing the interim role. But I don't, bottom line, I think I know you're asking that. We would have no problem getting prepared to close on a sale.
Okay, and Bob, you usually make the motions, you have the name, amount?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. This is the second time during our agenda that comments and suggestions, anyone can address the board or type on a chat if they are watching online. And hearing none, we'll go on to our action items. 9.01, Science and ELA Curricular Programming Purchases.
Just a second. Sorry about that. Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make 2 motions simultaneously to approve the recommended purchase of the K-12 ELA curriculum programming and resources materials as presented totaling $159,199, and the K-12 science curriculum programming and resources material as presented totaling $144,800.
You're still proposing 2 motions though, right?
Yes,
So 2 votes.
Right.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so for the first vote, we have a motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.02, oh, I'm sorry,
And then
the
the
second
second
motion.
motion.
The second
Yes.
motion,
For the science curriculum.
and we have a second on the second motion. Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.02, 2022-2023 student fees.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 student fees as presented and outlined.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.03, classified handbooks updates.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 classified employee handbook as presented.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.04, voter-approved PEPAL ballot resolution.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution for our PEPAL levy to be placed on the ballot and presented to the voters of the district as part of the September 13, 2022 election.
Any discussion?
I wonder, I know I write these recommended motions, and sometimes I think, ooh, I should have said, we should probably include in that,
For the $1.
the $1
per
levy.
thousand
Just so that's
levy.
official in.
I will amend it to that.
All right, thank you.
So do we have a second on the amendment?
Second.
All right, so which vote? Do we just need one vote?
Yes.
Okay, so any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.05, middle school surveillance camera upgrade.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve accepting the bid from Prime Communication for $52,180.05 for the equipment and installation as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.06, ESSER administrator incentive.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the addition of administrators to the $500 teacher and support staff incentive to be paid for Messer dollars as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
No.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.07, nutrition services bid.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the renewal of nutrition service bid contracts with Reinhardt Foods, Service and Performance Food Group, Rotella's, Dean Foods, Capital Sanitary, and Pizza Hut for the 2022-23 school year as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mrs. Shuffle.
Yes. 9.08, consider real estate bids.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the bid to purchase the LC property known as 1600 East Omaha Bridge Road from Scott Glenn for the amount of $500,000.
Any discussion?
My only concern about this was the piece of property that we had talked about many years ago as potentially a property switch with him. That would allow us to potentially capture property that could be expanded on our school property, because we do essentially have an abutting tract of land to that property. I just wish we would consider that as we look at that, as whether there's an interest from them to do that.
But in the railroad track, the old track runs through that, right? That
Yes.
divides it in the creek.
There isn't a creek there, just railroad tracks. Just
the
old
tracks.
railroad right-of-way that's been dedicated back to the city.
Yep.
But we have no other land that we can even grow or expand onto that adjoins our current campus.
I would only add, of course, that's a big thing to consider, that based on the dealings I've had with the city relative to the abandoned rail bed and things with the bike path, and trying to get access over that, which, you know, if you remember, we redesigned the entire ops building, the new ops building and the exit plan, because we wanted to go out South Omaha Bridge, and we could never get any traction from the city to do anything like that.
But they didn't want to give us access over the bike path. We could, if we use that for athletic fields or green space, we already have access to that ground without infringing upon, without getting a crossing on the bike path. Because all we would have to get would be a crossing over that abandoned railroad bed.
We have to cross the bike path no matter what.
We're already crossing the bike path to get to that.
Right,
To our,
and-
to get to our property.
Right.
But it's nothing driven, it's only pedestrian crossings.
It's all our mowing and everything else that we're doing.
But here's, I probably didn't explain this good enough. Just to recall that the city on this side of that rail bed already has a right-of-way piece of property extending all of our property that became a pretty extensive point of conversation, because we paint our practice fields, we encroach on that. And we were reminded of that. So there's going to be access where the city is in the middle of that I think could be problematic. That's just based on my experiences the last 3 years. The other thing is, this has not been, I think that if there was an interest there, that possibly we would have heard something. We've heard nothing. The other thing too is a good parcel of that property just beyond ours now is being dedicated for a cell tower. So not quite extending up to, like you're saying, like parallel with the high school, right? All the way up that way, but just beyond our property, they are dedicating about, what was that, what I showed you all, 100 by 100 feet, I think, 100 by 100 feet for a cell tower that's gonna go in there. But my thoughts are, that's not anything that has came up by anybody or proposed, during my time, and I don't know. I would think that if there was some kind of a swap available, that we would have heard about that, or seen somewhat of a similar offer with the bid being out there. And again, my worry is that you've got a good buyer. And through our discussions, we decided we did want to get rid of that property, and so you've got a good buyer that's just a a contract and an execution away from it being done.
Well, unless the city would give us, or we could extend through East South Omaha Bridge Road underneath the interstate to have another access, we still have, even if we want to expand, we still have all vehicles going through one spot. I mean, everyone is coming to our campus, and we go to, the corner 92 and Harry Langdon. I mean, everyone's coming into Titan Hill. All of it's funneling that way. And if we do expand, we would need to have another entrance, because it's just gets so congested.
I think Bob's thinking primarily like practice fields, which would be foot traffic, but I just know that slither of land that's owned by the city has, it's been a lot of it's been involved in a lot of discussions that we've had over the past couple of years relative to bike paths and such. We've been reminded of that. And,
Because it's not only just the railroad bed.
no, it's this side.
down.
We paint our practice field on city property, part of it on city property.
Right.
And if they were to prevent us from doing that, we really wouldn't have an ample practice field. And so I think about that being such a talking point, that trying to develop something where we're accessing over that and beyond that. But the other thought too is if that, I think you've got a fair offer, a fair price offer for the property that we have, that the board decided that we wanted to get rid of. And you can earmark that money. I mean, we can sit that money there and not do anything with it. And then we could explore a potential purchase if that property is available or were to become available. I would think the way market is right now for selling real estate, I would think that if that was available right now, we would have heard something. But we could still explore it with the funds that we receive from the purchase.
So just out of curiosity, how many acres is that, and how many acres would we need? Because the way I'm looking at this right now, with the way ground sells for by the acre, what are we looking at buying? How many acres?
There's two
And I-
parcels there.
And I don't know that we'd be able to swap. We'd have to throw some cash in on this deal.
Yeah, I think we're 2 point. Do we have that on here? We're under 3 acres.
And if we had an idea with some of the surrounding property, when you go down, is it 182nd Street? Down where the industrial park is going in. Do you see what that ground is going for per acre? We're probably not gonna get it, any bare ground bought for any less than that. I guess I'm to the point on this where we've kicked this around for a long time. We have our new building up. We have one offer that's above our asking price. It's good faith. They have cash in hand. And I say we just go ahead and make the sale. And if we want to buy some ground, we go back and do the same thing, we deal in good faith.
We don't have to spend the money.
Yeah.
It's not money we were budgeting for or anything of the sort, so
Right.
we don't have to spend the money. In reality, it's a much better market right now to sell than it is to buy, so you could leverage that by
Right.
maybe sitting dormant for a little while and seeing what happens.
I know when we sold the water tower area, it was suggested, I think I suggested we earmark that money for future development, and it was, nope, let's not tie our hands. Let's go ahead, but I'm okay with earmarking the 500,000 for a future, and we can always come back if we see it's needed elsewhere.
I think you have to always consider the situation when land is, it's determined to sell property, and I don't know the situation then, but sometimes when the district does that, it becomes opportunity to do something else as part of the budget planning process. That isn't this case. I mean, we literally, if you recall, I brought this up because I, wanted to work until I'm done, and I was making a list of all the things that I felt I wanted to take care of for the board. And so we had the discussion going back a couple months, do we want to sell, do we want to raise it, do we want to, I think we all agreed that we didn't want that dilapidated
Right.
building
And the liability.
sitting there with the
Right.
liability. And then I think when we got the appraisal and realized the real estate market, the board was unanimous in saying, let's go ahead
Right.
and sell, so.
Right. And we put it out to bid, and we have a good bid.
And if we decided we were going to keep it and do anything with the building at all, we'd have to knock it down.
You'd be starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Right.
And the advantage that CFI has, they do a lot line adjustment. All of a sudden, their property becomes bigger with a lot line adjustment, and the same code restrictions that we would have on a 2.5 acre lot goes away when you have more land.
Right.
We're limited on what we're gonna do
Right.
with that parcel.
We do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
No.
Mrs. Sheffel?
Yes. And now, items of interest. And I am going to take a moment. I know you don't want anything, but I am going to say something, because our meeting has concluded. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say something, because Lewis Central needs to thank you. I truly believe in everything happens for a reason. And you were here during an unprecedented time, and for all schools. And we had a lot of angst for 2.5 years, but you at the helm handled it with transparency and grace. And I feel once you've attended Lewis Central, either as a student, a volunteer, a board member, or worked at Lewis Central, you bleed blue. And so as you start the new chapter in your book called DK's Life, I have a little something for you to set on your new desk. And that should remind you that you are a Titan and will forever bleed blue. And I want to thank you for all you've done for Lewis Central. You've inspired excellence. You were here a short time, but you made an impact. So we wish the best of luck to you and your family. And watch for the invites to come back to Lewis Central, because you need to see a project done, and our auditorium is not completed yet. So you're not going to be too far, and we want to thank you. And if I had a hashtag, it would be, as you started the school year, hashtag skies of Titan Blue. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to be someone of few words. tonight, but I thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wouldn't trade, with COVID and all, I wouldn't trade the friendships and wouldn't trade it.
Yeah.
So it's been a great 3 years. I do know what I'm doing now, and I am moving on to something that is relative to the work that we do, but slightly different. So it's, I think I'm retiring as a Titan,
Yeah,
and I don't think that'll change.
yeah.
So,
So we can still be your exclamation point.
yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that was, Jackson used that in his graduation speech. He referred to a conversation he and I had where I said, if this 3 years becomes the exclamation mark on my career as public school educator, then I couldn't ask for a better exclamation mark. So it will always be that. So thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
And with that, items of interest, future board meetings. Our next regular board meeting will be almost a month away, July 18th, 2022. And anything else?
Oh, ma'am.
All right, with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Anyone second? All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? I guess you can stay, so thank you.